Hello and welcome to another edition of Everything I Watched, March 2023 edition. This is a series where I quickly review every piece of film I watched this month, from new to old releases, first-time viewings and rewatches, ranking from my least favorite to favorite. Last month I didn't do one of these, mostly because February was a super busy month for me, but also because I didn't really see a whole lot outside of what I reviewed in my main videos. If you do want to see a quick overview of what I watched in February, you can find that on my Instagram, link in description. This month is different because I did watch quite a bit and there's a lot to get through, so let's get right into it. First film on the chopping block, and my least favorite film I watched this month, we have Scream 6. Since I've seen this film, I know I am in the minority here. A lot of people seem to really like this film, and I can understand why. For me, I just felt like it did little to expand upon Scream's central concept or make me really invest in the main characters. The gore is pretty decent, and the setting of New York lends itself to at least one decent sequence. But other than that, I just found the film to be pretty bland, poorly written, and lacking in the wit and edge that made the original so endearing. It's closer to a 2 than a 1, but I still mostly stand by my rating for now. If you want to hear more, you can check out my full review as well. Next up is Netflix's We Have a Ghost, the sequel to We Bought a Zoo, where Matt Damon is killed by one of the animals and haunts the next family that buys the zoo. Actually, it's just about a ghost that becomes a viral media sensation who gets help from a teen boy as he tries to find out how he died and what his identity is. There's not a ton to say about this. It's pretty cheesy, but never really in an overtly annoying way. The humor and writing is okay most of the time, even if the script doesn't really create any meaningful commentary on fame or social media. It really does feel like a Disney Channel original from back in the day, and I do mean that as a compliment. It does contain some pretty dark themes and imagery that reminds me of a time when kids' movies had a little bit more edge to them, so I appreciate that. The film is definitely overstuffed, trying to juggle a lot of different ideas and stories in a runtime that doesn't really need to be as long as it is. It's not super memorable, but it's decent background noise, if nothing else. In preparation for John Wick Chapter 4, I decided to make my way through the series, which I hadn't really done before. The original John Wick is a pretty fun time, perfectly establishing the character as a force of nature that should be better left alone. I dug the action choreography and the subtle world building, so I was interested to see where the future films would take it. In my opinion, John Wick Chapter 2 is both a step forward and a step backward. The world building is now being fully fleshed out, adding several new and interesting characters to the mix, along with some new rules. It definitely bloats the film a bit in my opinion, taking the character of John Wick and making him more of a pawn for these ideas rather than a developing character. As far as the action goes, it's undeniable how solid a lot of these sequences are when it comes to gunplay. Yet there's not a ton of variety. It's a lot of pinpoint shots to the head and nothing too crazy outside of that. The locations do bolster those shootouts a bit, especially the climactic battle in an art exhibit filled with mirrors. There's some inconsistencies here, but its quick pace and impressive production make this a breeze to get through, and I had a good time throughout. Following that is Creed 2. I enjoyed the first film enough, especially when it came to how the fights were shot and how the story of Adonis was being told. This time around, I think a lot of that heart and technical proficiency was missing a bit, possibly because Ryan Coogler wasn't at the helm. I understand that these films exist in the Rocky universe, but this film really seemed to lean on its franchise crutches a bit with the reintroduction of Drago and his son. It creates a fun what-if scenario, but from a narrative perspective, it isn't quite as interesting as the prior film. It doesn't really get deeper than semi-correlated revenge, which is a shame. Still, Michael B. Jordan is still phenomenal, and supporting acts from Sylvester Stallone, Tessa Thompson, and Dolph Lundgren really amplifies some of the film's more emotional beats. Still gotta see the new one, but I'm excited to see what Jordan has in store for Creed. Next up is a rewatch of Game Night, a comedy action flick I find to be severely underrated. While not every Joker gag works, I do find it to be fairly consistent when it came to making me laugh. There's some great one-liners here. I quote that Frito-Lay line far more than I probably should. And the performances are pretty great, with Billy Magnussen and Jesse Plemons being the standouts for me. What I think I appreciate the most about this film, however, is how it's shot. There's a ton of really smart and creative ideas at play here when it comes to establishing shots and scene execution, whether it be presenting an aerial shot of a neighborhood like it's a Ford game, or a prolonged game of hot potatoes shot to look like it was done in one take. A lot of comedies don't put enough effort into the way their films look, which is a shame because it makes them far more memorable in my eyes. The film does get a bit more conventional in the latter half, but this is certainly a good time that I definitely recommend you check out if you haven't already. And now, following John Wick Chapter 2, I watched John Wick Chapter 4. What a freaking roller coaster. It drags a bit across its near 3 hours of runtime, but it's more or less worth it to see the absolutely insane display of action filmmaking. From creative kills to unique environments to fight in, Chapter 4 throws the bar through the damn ceiling, setting expectations astronomically high for action movies everywhere. I talk more about the film in its own video, along with showing you how to make a great bourbon cocktail. Be sure to check that one out. Up next, I finally got around to watching Aftersun, a movie that garnered a ton of acclaim in the festival circuit, along with nabbing a few Oscar nominations. It's a reflective, semi-autobiographical story about a daughter's vacation with her father and how that experience impacted her as an adult. It's a very sweet but solemn film about those small moments from our adolescent years that might not seem like much in the moment, but come back with sometimes life-warping implications. The lead performances from Paul Mescal and Frankie Corio really drive home the emotional vulnerability and down-to-earth tones of the film, though many may see this as a film where nothing happens. It's definitely a slice of life that won't resonate with everyone, but I can't deny the care and openness on display here. Generational pain is something that constantly connects us no matter where you're from, and I think this film is a great example of the helplessness we feel with the time and people we've lost. Another film I was happy to finally come around to is Martin Scorsese's Casino. But I'll be upfront, it certainly felt like a movie I've seen before. A lot of Scorsese's calling cards are there, from his heavy use of narration to the dynamic duo of Joe Pesci and Robert De Niro. I don't necessarily mind that too much, it's just that I kept being reminded of his other similar movies that do what this film does, but better. There's a lot of crisscrossing themes of masculinity, greed, organized crime that I think he pulls off much better in those other works. With that being said, it's still a Scorsese film, and even in repetition, I can still find enjoyment. I found the film to be highly engaging, due in part to its dueling narrative points of view, its timely in setting appropriate soundtrack, and its sharp and witty character interactions and dialogue. I think it's a bit too long, with some scenes not really adding to the overall narrative, and while I think it's acted fine enough, I'm a bit mixed on that Sharon Stone performance. It's bombastic while also being pretty messy, which I do think comes down to the writing. All in all, not a bad film if you just never want to leave the world in energy of Goodfellas. And now for a nearly flawless film that took me forever to finally watch. It's Pride and Prejudice. Somehow the book I spark-noted my way through in high school makes for one of the most tantalizing romance films I've seen. Who would have thought? But yeah, to the surprise of probably no one, this is a fantastic story of will they, won't they that manages to be witty, alluring, and sensual with not even a single kiss through most of the runtime. Jane Austen's novel is expertly adapted in a way that remains faithful to the text, accessible enough for the average viewer, and contains enough personality through its performances, score, and camera work to give it its own identity among other classic English romance stories. Not much left to say except damn, glad I finally got around to watching this one. And finally, my favorite movie I saw this month was a rewatch, but because of the way I saw it, it was like I was viewing it for the first time all over again. While visiting friends in New York, we were lucky enough to catch the world premiere of Spider-Man Into the Spiderverse, accompanied by a live orchestra and DJ to compose the score while we watched it. And when I say world premiere, I mean this is the first time this has been done for this movie. Organized by the film's composer, Daniel Pemberton, and performed by an all-female Brooklyn native orchestra, the film was somehow elevated beyond the perfect status I held for it. When it comes to animation, action, and Spider-Man films themselves, it really doesn't get any better than this. The lower frame rate style not only adds impact to characters' movements, but it also fits so well with the comic book art style. The story is still so funny, emotional, and engaging, due in part to the fantastic voice cast, animation team, and of course, a killer soundtrack. This film continues to hold its place as one of my favorite animated and superhero movies of all time, and I absolutely cannot wait for the sequel coming later this year. So yeah, that's all the movies I watched this month. I also tuned into the Oscars, which I think were a huge improvement over the past couple of years. A lot of awards went to my favorites, and there was little fluff focusing on what the Oscars were meant to do: honor the talented people that continue to help tell incredible stories through a variety of mediums. As for movies I'm looking forward to, well, April is certainly going to be a pretty stacked month. We've got the Mario movie, the new Evil Dead, Air, How to Blow Up a Pipeline, Beau is Afraid, and future Oscars sweeper, Mafia Mama. I'm looking forward to covering those films this month, but until then, thank you so much for tuning into this video. If you'd like to see more movie reviews and movie-themed cocktails, be sure to leave a like and subscribe, and check out my website, martinishot.blog. Until next time, thank you again for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Live deliciously, but please remember, drink responsibly.